Okay, so you might be thinking Kabirdas. Who?
Right.
Get
Yeah.
this 15th century mystic. His
Mhm.
words are still like super relevant today.
Oh,
Even centuries later,
yeah.
millions are still inspired by his work, and he even transcended religions.
Wow.
So we're going to dive deep into his life and his philosophy today.
Okay.
But don't worry, this isn't going to be like a boring history lecture or anything.
No, not at all.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah. What makes Kabirdas so fascinating is that he was a weaver, by trade,
Yeah.
but he ended up challenging the entire social and religious structure of his time.
It's like he had this double life, right?
Yeah.
Weaver on one hand and this radical thinker on the other.
Absolutely. And he chose poetry as his tool.
Oh,
He
wow.
used these short verses. They're called dohas and sakis.
Uh-huh.
They're kind of like spiritual fortune cookies, I guess you could say.
I love that, spiritual fortune cookies.
Yeah.
It really captures like the wisdom packed into such a small package.
Right.
But before we get to those, can you like paint a picture of what the world was like that he was born into?
Yeah. So imagine 15th century India, right?
Okay.
And it's a society steeped in tradition where religion plays this huge role in everyday life.
Uh-huh.
And this is where Kabirdas comes in,
Okay.
challenging all these norms with his, powerful poetry.
It sounds like he was like going against the grain in a big way.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What do we actually know about his background?
Well, even his origin story is, shrouded in mystery. There's different accounts.
Yeah.
But one that really stands out is the legend of him being found, as a baby on a lotus leaf.
Whoa, a lotus leaf. That's like straight out of mythology.
Right.
Yeah.
It almost adds to his mystique.
Uh-huh.
And it's believed that he was raised by a Muslim weaver,
Okay.
even though he may have been born to a Brahmin widow.
So he was exposed to like both Hindu and Muslim tradition
Exactly, yeah.
from a young age.
From a young age, and this, unique upbringing probably had a huge influence on, his inclusive worldview that he had
Yeah.
that went on to challenge the, rigid religious boundaries of his time.
So he's this Weaver poet pushing back against all the established norms.
Right.
What exactly was so radical about his philosophy?
Imagine being told that the divine isn't found in grand structures or in rituals, but, within each individual.
Mm.
That's what Kabirdas believed.
Wow.
He said God was like this hidden wellspring of truth inside every person.
So he's like turning the whole idea of seeking God outwardly on its head.
Totally.
He's saying, look within.
Yeah.
It's almost like a precursor to modern mindfulness in a way, wouldn't you say?
It definitely has those elements to it, yeah. And he wasn't just talking about, personal enlightenment either.
Yeah.
Kabirdas wanted everyone to have access to this truth.
Right.
That's where his connection to the Bhakti movement comes in.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit.
Sure.
The Bhakti movement, it was all about making spirituality accessible to everyone, right?
Exactly.
Regardless of their background.
Yeah, it was a social and religious reform movement that sought to, break down those barriers and empower people from all walks of life
Right.
to have their own, direct spiritual experiences.
And Kabirdas was like a key figure in this movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
His verses were, shared through song and through storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
and they became incredibly popular. It's amazing to think about, these poems being passed on from person to person
Yeah.
and, eventually finding their way into sacred texts.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So we're talking about this Weaver poet
Yeah.
shaping up the religious landscape, impacting spiritual traditions for centuries to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty impressive for a guy who made his living with a loom.
Right.
So how did he actually put his philosophy into practice?
Well, one of the most striking things about Kabirdas is his ability to connect with people through, simple yet profound language.
Uh-huh.
He didn't write in, the fancy Sanskrit of the scholars of the time.
Right.
He used everyday language that anyone could understand.
So he's meeting people where they are,
Yeah.
speaking to their hearts in a way they could really grasp immediately. It makes me think about how some of the most impactful spiritual teachings are often the simplest ones.
Totally agree. And one of the ways he conveyed those teachings was through those, powerful dohas,
Yeah, the spiritual fortune cookies.
Exactly.
Yeah, give me one.
Okay, so here's one that really, gets you thinking.
Okay.
In sorrow, everyone remembers God, but in happiness, no one does. If one remembers God in happiness, why would sorrow ever come?
Wow, that's so true, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so easy to turn to something, bigger than ourselves when things are tough.
Yeah.
But what about when life is good?
Yeah.
Kabirdas is reminding us to cultivate that connection to the divine, even when we're feeling joyful and content.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that, the divine isn't just a source of comfort in times of need,
Yeah.
but, it's this constant presence in our lives, both in the good times and in the bad.
It's like he's saying, don't just call on the divine when you need something.
Right.
Nurture that relationship all the time.
Exactly.
I can see how this idea would have resonated with, like, people from all walks of life.
Yeah, and it still resonates with us today, right?
Totally.
It's like we often compartmentalize spirituality.
Yeah.
And we kind of relegate it to certain times or certain places.
Mm-hmm.
But Kabirdas is challenging us to, like, integrate it into every aspect of our lives.
That's powerful. And I'm already feeling, like, inspired to look at my own life and see how I can apply that.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about, like, a real person who lived centuries ago.
Yeah.
Like, do we know anything about his personal life?
Well, that's where the stories and the legends come in.
Okay.
Because they offer these, like, glimpses into his character, his wit, his determination.
Oh.
And trust me, some of these tales are pretty entertaining.
Okay. I'm ready for a good story. What's your favorite?
Well, one that I find particularly charming is about young Kabirdas and his guru, Ramananda.
Okay.
Kabirdas was determined to become Ramananda's disciple, right?
Mm.
But the guru wasn't so easily convinced.
Oh, okay.
So young Kabirdas, he lays down on the steps leading to the Ganges River,
Okay.
knowing that Ramananda would walk by every morning to take his bath.
So he, like, put himself in the guru's path purposely?
Right.
That's pretty bold.
It is, and it worked.
What happened?
Well, Ramananda accidentally stepped on Kabirdas.
Oh.
And in surprise, he cried out, "Ram, Ram!"
Uh-huh.
And Kabirdas cleverly took this as his initiation mantra.
Wow, so smart.
It shows his quick wit and, like, this unwavering dedication to his spiritual path.
Yeah, it shows, like, a different side of Kabirdas, a bit mischievous, but also incredibly determined.
Yeah, and that fearlessness extended to his teachings.
Yeah.
He challenged authority, he questioned tradition, and ultimately he encouraged everyone to find their own, like, direct path to the divine.
It sounds like there's so much we can learn from Kabirdas.
Yeah.
Even all these centuries later.
Right.
But where do we even begin?
Well, that's a great question.
Like, his work can feel so vast and a little intimidating.
Yeah, it can.
How do we unpack it all?
I think a good starting point is to understand the core principles that kind of underpinned his philosophy.
Okay, I'm ready to dive in. What are some of those core principles, and, like, how can we connect them to our own lives?
Okay, so let's start with his emphasis on, like, inner growth and self-awareness.
Okay.
Because Kabirdas believed that, like, true spirituality wasn't about outward displays of piety, but about cultivating these, like, inner virtues, like honesty, humility, and compassion.
So it's not about, like, looking good on the outside, but really doing the inner work.
Exactly. And this inner work isn't always easy.
Right.
It requires us to, like, confront our own shortcomings and acknowledge, our shadows, and to constantly strive for growth.
So it sounds like he's advocating for, like, a radical self-honesty.
He is.
But how do we even, like, begin to cultivate that level of self-awareness?
Well, Kabirdas believed that one of the most powerful tools for self-discovery was meditation.
Okay.
And not just any kind of meditation, but a specific practice called Surat Shabd Yoga.
Surat Shabd Yoga. I have to admit, that name sounds a little intimidating.
I know, right? But it's not as complicated as it sounds.
Okay.
You can think of it like tuning your radio to a specific frequency, right?
Okay.
You have to quiet the static of your thoughts to hear the, like, divine melody within.
So it's about quieting the mind and tuning into something deeper.
Yeah.
Something that's already there within us.
Exactly. And this practice, according to Kabirdas, allows us to, like, transcend the limitations of the physical world.
Yeah.
And experience this, like, state of union with the divine.
That sounds incredibly powerful, but also challenging.
It is.
Like, did Kabirdas offer any guidance on how to navigate those challenges?
He did, and one of his key recommendations was the importance of satsang,
Satsang.
which literally means company of truth.
So it's about, like, surrounding yourself with people who are also on a spiritual path.
Precisely, yeah.
Okay.
Kabirdas believed that, like, gathering with others, sharing those spiritual insights, and singing devotional songs could really uplift the soul and accelerate spiritual progress. And he really emphasized that this collective energy, could help amplify individual efforts.
It's like that saying, iron sharpens iron. Like,
Right.
we can learn and grow so much more when we're in the company of others who are also seeking truth.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great place to pause for now.
Okay.
I've covered a lot of ground.
We have, but I'm already feeling so inspired by his story and his message.
Yeah.
I can't wait to delve even deeper.
Well, get ready for more, because in our next segment, we're going to uncover some even more fascinating insights into Kabirdas' world
Ooh, I'm excited.
and the enduring legacy of his wisdom.
Can't wait. All right, we left off talking about the importance of satsang, surrounding yourself with people who are also on a spiritual path.
Right.
It's like having a spiritual support system.
Yeah.
But what about those times when you're on your own, like navigating life's ups and downs? What guidance did Kabirdas offer for those like solo journeys?
Well, Kabirdas was a big believer in self-reliance.
Okay.
He felt that the path to liberation is ultimately an inner one,
Uh-huh.
and each individual is responsible for their own spiritual growth.
So no gurus, no fancy rituals, no relying on external forces.
Right.
It's all about like cultivating that inner connection and trusting your own intuition.
Exactly.
Did he have any like specific practices that he recommended for, developing that inner connection?
Yeah, absolutely. He often talked about the importance of simple living.
Okay.
He believed that by simplifying our lives, detaching from material possessions, and focusing on what truly matters, we create this space for spiritual growth and compassionate action.
So it's not about like living in poverty or anything.
Right.
It's about like decluttering not just our homes, but also like our minds.
Yeah,
Letting go of the unnecessary so we can focus on what's truly important.
exactly.
Did he talk about how to actually do that?
Yeah, he emphasized practicing mindfulness in daily life.
Okay.
Like not getting swept up in anxieties
Right.
or attachments to material things.
Yeah.
It's about finding contentment and appreciating the present moment.
It's so relevant today, right?
Yeah.
With all the pressures of consumerism
Yeah.
and just like the constant bombardment of information.
Totally.
It's so easy to get like caught up in that pursuit of more, more, more.
Yeah.
But it sounds like Kabirdas is saying, hey, step back, take a breath, appreciate what we have.
Absolutely. Yeah. He was all about finding that inner peace,
Yeah,
that sense of contentment,
right.
which can then become the foundation for compassionate action.
Yeah.
It's like when we're not consumed by our own desires and anxieties,
Yeah.
we have more space in our hearts to really care for others.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It is hard to be truly present for others when your own mind is like cluttered with worries and desires.
Right.
So Kabirdas believed in simple living, self-reliance, inner growth,
Uh-huh.
and connecting with the divine
Yeah.
within. Are there any other like core principles that we should know about?
Well, this might seem kind of obvious, but it's worth highlighting.
Okay.
Kabirdas was a huge champion of unity
Uh-huh.
and compassion.
Okay.
He really saw the divine spark in every being,
Yeah.
regardless of their social standing, their religious beliefs,
Right.
or any other external markers.
We touched on this earlier with like his rejection of the caste system.
Yeah.
It was a very radical stance for his time.
It
A
was.
direct challenge to like that social hierarchy that had been in place for centuries.
Exactly. And his emphasis on unity wasn't just some kind of philosophical concept. He actually lived this belief,
Okay.
welcoming people from all walks of life into his community.
It's such a powerful example.
It is.
Especially in today's
Gotcha.
world, which often feels so like increasingly polarized
Yeah.
and divided. It's like we focus so much on our differences
Yeah.
that we forget about the fundamental things that connect us as human beings.
He reminds us that those differences are often superficial.
Uh-huh.
And beneath the surface, we all share that same spark of the divine.
I love that. And once we like recognize that interconnectedness, that
Yeah.
shared spark,
Right.
it becomes so much harder to like justify hatred, discrimination, violence.
Absolutely.
It's a shift in perspective that could have like such profound implications for how we interact with each other and
Ah.
the world around us.
Yeah, it's like Kabirdas is offering us this roadmap
Okay.
for personal and societal transformation, encouraging us to choose love and compassion over fear and division.
It's a beautiful film.
It is.
But it also feels incredibly challenging to actually like live out in the real world.
Right.
So where do we even begin to apply these principles in our daily lives?
Well, that's where Kabirdas' emphasis on, self-awareness and inner work comes in.
Okay.
He really believed that creating a better world starts with transforming ourselves.
So it's not about writing for the world to change before we can find peace.
Exactly.
It's about finding that peace within ourselves
Yeah.
and then letting it like radiate outwards,
Yeah.
influencing our thoughts, our actions, our interactions with others.
Precisely. He encouraged his followers to constantly question their assumptions,
Okay.
to strive for authenticity in all aspects of their lives,
Uh-huh.
and to never become complacent on the path of spiritual growth.
It's like he's saying, don't become a spiritual couch potato. Keep seeking, keep questioning, keep evolving.
Exactly. Yeah.
But Kabirdas didn't just talk the talk, he also walked the walk, right?
Right.
Like, are there any stories that illustrate how he actually embodied these principles in his own life?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many captivating tales about Kabirdas
Yeah.
that really showcase his wit, his wisdom, and his unwavering commitment to his beliefs.
Okay.
One that comes to mind is the story of his death.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So remember, Kabirdas really transcended religious boundaries.
Yeah.
So when he passed away, both his Hindu and Muslim followers wanted to perform his last rites
Right.
according to their own traditions.
Oh, I can see how that could cause some tension.
Right?
What happened?
Okay, so it's a remarkable ending.
Okay.
When they lifted the cloth that was covering his body,
Yeah.
instead of finding, like, his remains, they discovered only a pile of flowers.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a powerful symbol.
Right. And these flowers were then divided between his Hindu followers and his Muslim followers.
Okay.
And each group performed their respective rituals.
Wow. So even in death, Kabirdas managed to, like, bridge the divide
Right.
and emphasize the unity that he preached throughout his life.
Exactly.
It's beautiful how that story just, like, encapsulates his message of transcendence and unity.
It does.
But, sometimes these historical figures can feel a bit distant. Like, how can we connect with someone from the 15th century on a personal level? How can we make Kabirdas's wisdom, like, relevant to our modern lives?
That's where I think his poetry is so powerful.
Okay.
Because his words, they really cut through time.
Yeah.
And they speak directly to the human heart, regardless of, when or where you're reading them.
It's true. There's a real timeless quality to his teaching.
Yeah.
They address, like, the core of the human experience.
They do.
Do you have a favorite verse that, like, really exemplifies this?
One that always resonates with me is this. I went looking for the wicked, but I found none. When I searched my own heart, I realized I was the most wicked of all.
Whoa, that's like a powerful statement.
Yeah.
It's almost like a Zen koan,
Right.
What do you think Kabirdas is trying to say with this verse?
I think it's a really profound call to self-reflection. It's this reminder that before we, point fingers at others, we need to take a good, hard look at ourselves.
It's so easy to, like, judge other people.
It is.
To see their flaws, their shortcomings.
Right.
But Kabirdas is challenging us to, like, turn that scrutiny inward.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging our own shadows, our own wickedness, as he puts it.
Right. But it's not about, like, beating ourselves up.
No, not at all.
Or feeling shame or anything.
Right. It's about using that self-awareness as this catalyst for growth. It's about recognizing that we all have the potential for both darkness and light within us.
Yeah, and by, like, acknowledging our shadows,
Yeah.
we can begin to integrate them and move towards wholeness.
Precisely. It's a journey of self-discovery and transformation.
Yeah.
And it's a journey that can lead us to, like, a deeper understanding of ourselves, our connection to others, and the divine spark that resides within us all.
It really makes you think.
It does.
It's so easy to get caught up in, like, external appearances, in projecting a certain image to the world.
Right.
But Kabirdas is reminding us that, like, real transformation happens on the inside.
It does. And that inner transformation has the power to, like, ripple outwards and influence our relationships, our communities, and the world at large.
As we're talking, I'm realizing that Kabirdas wasn't just a spiritual teacher, but he was also kind of like a social activist in his own way.
Oh, absolutely. His challenge to the caste system, was a direct attack on social injustice.
Right.
And his emphasis on, like, unity and compassion was a call for a more just and equitable world.
It's like he was saying, don't just sit there and meditate, get out there and make a difference.
Exactly. And he showed that you don't have to choose between, like, inner peace and social action.
Right.
They can go hand in hand.
It's about bringing that inner peace, that sense of unity into, like, everything we do.
Yeah.
It's about letting our actions be guided by, like, love and compassion rather than fear and division.
Exactly.
But I have to add, was Kabirdas's message well received by everyone?
That's a good question.
I mean, like, challenging the status quo, especially in such a deeply religious society, I imagine that would have ruffled some feathers.
You're absolutely right. He definitely faced opposition, especially from, like, the religious authorities of his time, who felt threatened by his teachings.
So they felt like he was, like, undermining their authority?
Yeah, he didn't shy away from criticizing religious hypocrisy or blind adherence to dogma.
So was he, like, against religion altogether?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's one that scholars still debate to this day. I think it's more nuanced than a simple yes or no.
Okay, let's unpack that nuance.
Sure.
What do you mean?
Well, from what I've gathered, Kabirdas wasn't against the essence of religion.
Okay.
Which, at its core, is about connecting with the divine.
Uh-huh.
He was against the rigid structures, the
Okay.
rituals, the power dynamics that often get in the way of that connection.
So he was more about the spout of religion rather than the letter of the law.
Exactly.
Okay.
He believed that true spirituality wasn't about following rules
Uh-huh.
or performing ceremonies.
Right.
It was about cultivating a direct, personal relationship with the divine.
It's about the heart, not just the outward actions.
Exactly.
And this message, I can imagine, was quite revolutionary.
Oh, yeah.
Especially at a time and place where, religion held so much power.
Right.
It's interesting to think about how his message might be received today.
Yeah.
I imagine he would still have a lot to say about the ways in which religion is sometimes used to, divide and control people.
Oh, for sure. I think he'd still be advocating for unity and compassion.
Yeah.
And the transcendence of, artificial boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
He'd probably be using his, poetic voice
Okay.
to challenge injustice, hypocrisy, and the abuse of power wherever it arises.
He might even have a podcast.
Ha ha. Now that would be something.
I can just imagine him dropping truth bombs in the form of, dohas.
Yeah.
And challenging us all to look within.
I think you're right. He wouldn't let us off easy.
Yeah.
He'd challenge us to confront our biases, to question our assumptions,
Uh-huh.
and to truly, live up to those ideals of love and compassion that he so passionately advocated.
This has been such an enlightening conversation.
It has.
I feel like we've only scratched the surface of, Kabirdas' wisdom.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share about his life or his teachings before we, move on?
Well, I think it's important to emphasize that Kabirdas' message wasn't just about, criticizing what was wrong.
Okay.
He also offered a path forward,
Right.
a vision for a more just and compassionate world.
It's he wasn't just complaining about the problems, he was offering solutions.
Exactly. And those solutions, as we've discussed,
Yeah.
are really rooted in the belief that the divine is within each of us.
So it's about recognizing that inherent divinity in ourselves and in others, regardless of our differences.
Right. And once we, grasp that fundamental truth, it changes everything.
Wow.
It changes how we see ourselves, how we interact with others, and how we engage with the world around us.
It's a powerful message.
It is.
And one that feels so desperately needed in today's world,
I agree.
But I have to ask, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
How do we take all this wisdom and actually apply it to our own lives?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is different for everyone.
Okay.
But I believe Kabirdas would encourage us to start by looking within.
So back to that idea of self-reflection.
Exactly. Yeah, to spend some time in quiet contemplation.
Uh-huh.
To, ask ourselves those big questions about who we are,
Yeah.
what we believe, and how we want to live our lives.
It's about, really getting to know ourselves
Yeah.
at a deeper level.
Right. And once we have a better understanding of ourselves, then we can start to cultivate those qualities that Kabirdas emphasized.
Uh-huh.
Compassion, humility, honesty,
Yeah.
and a deep connection to that divine spark that resides within us all.
It sounds like a lifelong journey.
It is a lifelong
But it
journey.
sounds like a journey that's worth taking.
Oh, absolutely.
And who knows, maybe along the way we'll discover a bit of Kabirdas within ourselves.
I think so.
We've been on quite the journey with Kabirdas.
Yeah.
From his humble beginnings as a weaver to his radical spiritual teachings.
Yeah.
His life and legacy are truly fascinating.
It is.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, there's one more aspect of his philosophy that I'd love to explore.
Yeah.
And that's his perspective on death.
Death.
Right.
But yeah, the great mystery that we all must face.
It's a topic that, many spiritual traditions grapple with.
Well, yeah,
And Kabirdas was no exception.
for sure.
So how did he approach this,
Yeah.
shall we say, delicate subject?
Well, Kabirdas didn't shy away from talking about death at all.
Okay.
In fact, he saw it as an integral part of life,
Hmm.
a natural transition rather than, something to be feared.
That's quite a different perspective from what we often hear,
Right?
in modern society,
Yeah.
where death is often seen as this, taboo subject, something to be avoided at all costs.
For sure, Kabirdas believed that by contemplating our own mortality,
Okay.
we could gain this, deeper appreciation for the preciousness of life
Mm-hmm.
and the importance of, living each moment to the fullest.
So it's about using that awareness of death
Yeah.
as a motivator to, live more consciously,
Uh-huh.
more intentionally.
Precisely. And this ties back to his emphasis on, simple living,
Okay.
on detaching from material possessions,
Right.
and, on focusing on what truly matters.
Yeah.
Because when we're so caught up in the pursuit of, fleeting pleasures or worldly success,
Yeah.
we kind of lose sight of the bigger picture.
It's like that saying, you can't take it with you.
Right.
Like Kabirdas seems to be saying, don't wait until you're on your deathbed to realize what's truly important.
Yeah,
Start living that way now.
exactly. And he believed that by living in alignment with, our true nature,
Yeah.
with that, like, divine spark within us,
Okay.
we could approach death with a sense of peace and acceptance.
About letting go of the fear.
Yeah.
And like embracing the unknown.
Right, because for Kabirdas, death wasn't the end.
Hmm.
It was simply a transition to another state of being.
Do we know, like, what he believed happened after death?
Yeah, so Kabirdas believed in the concept of reincarnation,
Okay.
that the soul continues on this, like, journey of evolution through multiple lifetimes.
So death wasn't an ending, but a new beginning.
Right,
A chance to, like, learn and grow and continue on the path toward enlightenment.
precisely. And this perspective on death can offer this, like, profound sense of comfort and hope,
Yeah.
because even though, our physical bodies will eventually perish,
Uh-huh.
our essence, that divine spark within us, continues on.
It's a beautiful and reassuring thought,
It is.
especially in a world where, like, death is often portrayed as something dark and scary.
Right. I think Kabirdas would remind us that death is just a natural part of the cycle of life.
Yeah.
And by embracing it with, like, courage and acceptance,
Uh-huh.
we can free ourselves from the fear that often holds us back.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
And one that I think we all need to hear. But did Kabirdas, like, offer any specific advice on how to actually prepare for death?
Yeah, he believed that the best way to prepare for death was to, live a life of purpose,
Okay.
to cultivate those, like, inner virtues of honesty, compassion, humility,
Mm-hmm.
and to stay connected to that divine spark
So
within.
it's about, like, living each day as if it were your last.
Yeah.
Not in, like, a reckless way or a
Uh-huh.
hedonistic way, but in a way that really honors your true self
Uh-huh.
and, like, contributes to the well-being of others.
Precisely. And by doing so, we can approach death with this, like, sense of peace,
Yeah.
knowing that we lived our lives to the fullest
Uh-huh.
and made a positive impact on the world.
As we're talking about death, I'm struck by the fact that Kabirdas' own passing was quite remarkable.
Yeah.
We talked earlier about how both his Hindu and Muslim followers wanted to, like, claim him after his death.
Right?
That's the story with the flowers. It beautifully illustrates his message of transcendence and unity.
It does.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, what would Kabirdas say about the state of the world today?
That's an interesting question to ponder.
Yeah.
I think he'd likely still be advocating for, love, compassion, and understanding, especially in a world that often feels increasingly divided.
I can imagine him, like, challenging us to look beyond those differences,
Yeah.
to see the humanity in everyone,
Right.
and to, like, build bridges instead of walls.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's easy to imagine him, like, shaking his head at the conflicts and injustices that we see all around us. But I also believe he would, offer a message of hope,
Yeah.
reminding us that we all have that power to make a difference.
He'd probably encourage us to start by transforming ourselves,
Okay.
by cultivating, like, that inner peace
Yeah.
and letting it radiate outwards into our interactions with others.
You're right. He'd remind us that, like, change starts from within.
Uh-huh.
And that even, like, small acts of kindness and compassion
Yeah.
can have a ripple effect, creating positive change in the world.
Right. And who knows, maybe those ripples will eventually create a wave of transformation,
Wow.
bringing us closer to that vision of unity and love that Kabirdas so passionately advocated.
That's a beautiful thought, and one that I want to leave our listeners with.
Yeah,
This deep dive into the world of Kabirdas has been truly enlightening.
it has.
His teachings are this reminder that, like, even centuries later,
Yeah,
his words still hold this immense power and relevance.
I agree. And while this deep dive may be coming to an end,
Yeah.
we hope that the conversation about Kabirdas,
Uh-huh.
his wisdom and his legacy will continue on.
Yes.
And perhaps his teachings will inspire you to explore your own spiritual path,
Right.
to connect with that divine spark within,
Yeah.
and to live a life of, purpose, compassion, and love.
Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey.
It's been a pleasure.
We encourage you to, like, read Kabirdas' poetry,
Mm-hmm.
reflect on his teachings,
Mm-hmm.
and to see how his wisdom can guide you on your own unique path.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going. 20 years.